Hello, my friends. Hello. Welcome to a new edition of the Tinfoil Transmission. I have today with me a very special guest, a very good friend of mine, John Carini. We're going to be discussing some interesting subjects about the digital ecosystem. We was doing a show quite recently on Rabbit Hole Ramblings. Big shout out to Sean over there who invites us on to shout our conspiracies around. And I mentioned that, I do have a bit of a in-depth knowledge about this particular sort of asset class, and something that John is interested in, and I know a few people that I've spoken to recently are interested in. So I thought I would take the opportunity with John kindly sharing his time with us to do our first co-live. So no gimmicky songs, no quirky intros, just some straight hard facts about potentially what the future holds for us with finance, and see if we can get some information across that's relevant and beneficial to people. So anyone that joins in, welcome. Thank you so much for your time. Do appreciate every single one of you. The subscribers are growing very, very quickly. So yeah, sorry I haven't been able to do anything over the last couple of weeks. I did mention on one of the shows previously that my schedule has changed quite a lot over the last sort of month. And, with sunny Spain being sunny, the last thing you want to do is being cooped up in the house all day. So I want to just welcome everybody. This is John. If you're not familiar with John, this is John Carini. Very intelligent man, and we're going to be sharing a little bit of time together tonight just to talk about some conspiracies. So why don't you introduce yourself, John, and tell us what it is you want to talk about.
Thanks, Nikos. Hi, everyone. Good to be on the channel. My first time on your channel. I know we've done some panel collaboration on another channel. Am I allowed to say who that is?
Yeah. Plug him all day long.
Okay, let's give Sean a plug over at Rabbit Hole Ramblings. I'm sure we can put the link in as well in the chat. We've how long we've been on Rabbit Hole? Is it about a year maybe?
I think it's longer. I think the first one we've done with Sean on, is from a different channel. So I think we've been doing it for about probably over 18 months, remember right? Maybe knocking on nearly 2 years. They're quite sporadic and not as regular as maybe they could be, but it's been a while, and we talk about all sorts of stuff. But this subject, finance, ties into a lot of what we're talking about on the more political side of the spectrum of conspiracies. And I haven't mentioned it a few times. I tend to get a lot of questions, and for my private circle, I get questions all the time as well. So let's talk about it on here.
Yeah, let's go for it. Interesting subjects.
Very interesting subject.
Yeah, we've not really gone into it in depth on the Rabbit Hole Ramblings. So I suppose tonight is a really good opportunity to explore it a little bit more specifically, because I'm a novice on this sort of subject matter of cryptocurrency. Why I'm on here, I suppose, is because I come from that viewpoint of Nikos showed me a little bit about what he does, and I signed up for a cryptocurrency website, and I'm at the stage now where I haven't actually put any money into anything, but we're just looking at it and getting familiar with the whole settings and so on, and get started on it pretty soon. I'm eager to get some coins on the
nice. The hardest step is the first step, John. We've all been there. I remember the first time I received my first cryptocurrency, I received Bitcoin as a payment for some transaction. I can't remember what it was now, but it was quite a significant amount of money. And the fastest way of moving the money from where it was coming from, which was America, it actually needed to be sent directly to me in a way where I could facilitate and access it. So the traditional banking system is, as a lot of people might be aware, considerably outdated. The SWIFT system, which controls a lot of the remittances that move internationally, like I said, I sort of had my first experience from America. It can be a very daunting process from a sort of personal point of view, but also from a business point of view. If you're running a business and you have an international business where you require lots of payments moving around, it can be very tedious, because the traditional system, which is SWIFT, it can take up to 21 working days to receive a remittance from another country. That's the kind of like time frame they put on it. But it has many flaws, and one of the major flaws in it is not only the time delay, it's also a slippage rate or a failure rate. So the traditional financial system that we use today, that our banks all use and facilitate money movement with, it is, I think, about 7% slippage rate. So you can send money 100 times and they can guarantee you that, generally 7 times out of that 100, your payment will fail and come back to your bank. And that will require you to resend it at another transaction. So the fees are obviously quite high. We all know sending money around the world can be very expensive. I think traditionally most banks will charge you a one-off nominal fee of between 25 and 50 pounds for an international payment, but sometimes they can charge you a percentage as well. So there's obviously a lot of flaws in the old system. So I think a lot of people are prepared for maybe an update to the way the money moves. And this is what I explained to yourself, that this is likely going to be the way that they do it. That an update on finance, similar way we saw an update to information in the late 1990s, early 2000s with the internet. So it's just a case of familiarizing yourself with why they would do it and the benefits from doing it. But from a business owner's point of view, cryptocurrency serves sort of many purposes because it can make payments immediate, seconds. It can cost fractions of a cent, not even fractions of a dollar, fractions of a cent to send money. And there's no restrictions on the limits that you can send. Ashton Kutcher actually went on Ellen DeGenerate's show a few years ago now, like 15 years ago, maybe 10 years ago. And he sent a donation to one of her charities in Africa, I believe it was. And he moved like $4 million instantly to her charity live on the show. And it was actually a company that we're going to probably mention maybe in tonight's show called Ripple. But the whole goal for what they're doing with cryptocurrency is sort of digital enslavement, as I think we've all probably become aware with. So the digital system needs, plumbing, it needs fundamentals, it needs laws, regulations. There's lots of things that need to be in place for it to actually come into full effect. And on top of that, you've got the control from the people that are currently making the fees, the beneficiaries of the fees, the people that are holding the money when it's moving around the world. When it takes 21 working days, it's sitting in someone's account. These are known as Nostro and Vostro accounts. A lot of people are not aware that the way that a bank works internationally is it doesn't actually move the money from, say, your account in England to my account in Spain. It's the bank actually has alliances with banks here. So what would happen is it's done with a messaging system. So the message would actually go from, say, your Santander account in England, and it would message my BBVA account here, say, please move this much money from our holding account to this account in this account holder's name. So the money doesn't actually physically move from your account to my account. It basically moves from your account, subtracted by your bank, and then they basically give the nod to account here that says move it from our account to his account. So I think a lot of people are just not aware how the system actually moves its money around. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, that's something I think people don't know. Unless someone like yourself understands these things, we wouldn't just be able to find that out that easy. Is that correct? Am I thinking along the right lines there?
Yeah, they give you the perception that because they're charging a fee for the service. So also as well, it would raise awareness to the risk. So if they made it aware that that's how the system sort of works, it's not a secret. But unless you've actually worked in sort of finance and owned businesses and stuff like that, you wouldn't be familiar with how this works. You're just under the assumption that you press a button and it moves from one account to another account. But that's not how it works. So to understand why the benefits of cryptocurrency would actually be part of a new financial sort of dystopian future, you have to understand the flaws in the system first.
So am I right in thinking that if someone's transferring money from one account in the, let's say, like the crypto world, would that work in terms of if I'm going to transfer money to you where you are and we're not in the same country, do I have to select a particular coin or can I just transfer that to your account? How would that actually be a process?
Yeah, the value is actually in the coin itself. So you could move money to me immediately without a middleman. So the cryptocurrency serves a purpose where you don't need a middleman to move your money around. You're the custodian of your money, and I'll be the direct beneficiary of the decisions that you make by sending your money. There's no slippage rate. There's no mistakes. There's no it's going into a Nostro Vostro account from either end. It cuts out the middleman. So from a sort of bigger picture point of view, businesses can run a lot more efficiently by having that kind of facilitated finance, but there also is inherited risks with it as well. So mistakes are penalized. There's no, for example, if you send your money to an account number, there's no clawing it back. Whereas with a bank, for example, you would be able to maybe flag up that it was an incorrect payment, and they might be able to stop it because it's currently in the removal process between A and B. So they would basically send a message to their other counterparty in the other country and say, we've made a mistake, please amend this. There's sort of a period of time where they can make amendments, cancellations. This is why if you go through credit card frauds and have frauds on your account, they can stop payments. If you send money internationally by mistake, by some sort of scam you're involved with or something like that, they can catch it. But with cryptocurrency, it's instant. So you'd move your money, you're right, you'd move your money instantly, but there's lots of different blockchains have different ways of facilitating it. But there are a few key players that we'll discuss shortly that actually are the ones sort of running with the industry with it. They have currently gone through sort of extensive security measures. They've got counter risk parties that, are involved with the back end of it all. If you were involved in some sort of type of illicit scam, there are things that they can do. I know in India in particular, there's lots of call centers that do run their scams solely off of cryptocurrency now, and all around the world, not to pick out India in particular, but there is value that you can move on pretty much any coin. So at the moment, I don't know how many there are, but there's tens of thousands of different coins. So it wouldn't matter what you had. The only issue is when you come to move that coin, is it a liquid enough coin to be able to pull your money out of? So this is why you generally will stick to the ones that are, predominant in the movement of value. One of the ones I mentioned to you before, which is actually specializing in cross-border payments, remittances, is XRP. It's a company called XRP. I've mentioned it before, I think, on my show. They actually are using it as their sort of main use case, and they've come out as a company that basically runs their ledger. These are electronic ledgers, and they have said that their goal would be to try and facilitate some sort of type of one world currency. If you've been in conspiracies long enough, you would know that that's kind of their end goal here. They want to make a one world currency, one world government, all this kind of stuff. If you've listened to any of the WEF and any of these conspiracy theorists, they've been around for a long time, it's always in the back of your mind that this is what they want to achieve. So for me, to answer the question, there's not particularly any coin that you need to really have, but there are better ones that you can have than some that are maybe not so beneficial to move value with.
One word you mentioned a little while ago, which I've heard before and I've never really understood it. Obviously, I could have Googled it, but I wanted to hear it from someone who understands it rather than just trusting on a Google, is the word blockchain.
Yeah, blockchain is basically, it's a digital ledger. So think of it this way: the banks themselves hold a lot of their information on paper. If you've ever been into a bank and you've seen the storage cabinets, the filing cabinets, blockchain makes everything digitalized, so they can see every single transaction. Blockchain itself is just a digital ledger, so it's a way of electronically seeing everything. It exposes every transaction. This would be tying into cashless society. So if you believed in, the conspiracy circles that they are going to try and create a cashless society, blockchain would enable them to not only see what everyone's doing, but it would also keep everything on a ledger. So everything can be reviewed at a later stage as well for forever. So this technology potentially could be around for hundreds of years, and they'd be able to track back every transaction digitally without having to go into digging through a filing cabinet somewhere in a building that they own somewhere. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that gives me a good overview of it, because I've heard it a lot. I thought, what's blockchain?
Yeah.
And I've associated it with that sort of world that I never knew anything about, the cryptocurrency world. And obviously the first thing that we heard about cryptocurrency is Bitcoin. So where does Bitcoin sit compared to everything now? Or is it the complete original? Was it like the the sort of founding cryptocurrency, or was there others that we didn't know about that were under the radar?
Maybe. Again, for a disclaimer, this is, not financial advice, and a lot of this is allegedly, correct information. But from my understanding, when Bitcoin first come around, I've become familiar with it in like 2012. Someone who worked for me suggested buy Bitcoin, and I, at the time, naively thought it was some sort of type of physical coin. I thought it was some sort of type of metal. I thought it was like a gold coin. The whole concept was beyond me. But I think Bitcoin itself, like any technology, they have like a beta testing period, and I think personally, it falls under that category. Now, the criteria at the minute for what I would say would be what would be necessary for the foundations of a new system, and what would be necessary for them to, use something with use cases, would have a criteria. And one of the main criteria that I have, I'll quickly read off my criteria of what I would see as value in this particular space. The top one is energy consumption, and coins like Bitcoin and Ethereum, they're very high intensive energy consumers. So you've seen the big warehouses with all the computers running, with no one around, like where they're just mining all day long, these, particular tokens on the blockchains, but they use a lot of energy. Going into the world where we're sort of talking about green energy all the time, one of the criteria I would think would be something that's very, very low energy consumption. And Bitcoin itself, as long as it's been around for a long time now. I think it's knocking on 15 years or something like this. It has consumed a lot of energy. I think it consumes the same amount of energy annually as the whole country of Argentina. So, for something to be of value in the future in a new system, it would have to make sense, from an energy consumption point of view. Other things that I see that would be of value would be the use cases of some of these particular currencies. Some of them have to have a purpose. There's no point buying stuff that's not going to be used, but use cases is very, very important. A good thing to look out for is also partnerships. So a lot of this information is public, what these companies do, and what their intentions are, what their goals will be. But they've all signed up with very high profile partners in different areas and different parts of the world. Again, I'll cover a couple of them later on. But scalability is also important. You want to have something that going forward that would be better than the last beta tested product. So if Bitcoin and Ethereum, as successful as they've been, the beta period would finish, and then they would understand what upgrades would be necessary for them to be able to move forward with something more scalable. So scalability would be a very important part of identifying, value in this particular asset class. You want to have something that would appeal to high money. So institutional appeal is also something you keep an eye out for. So if you can find a niche where you think this is going to be like a necessity to institutions, that again is something important. And also as well, a good way of identifying potential value in what would be after the beta period would be stuff that's got high potential growth, and identify maybe by market capitalization, so the value of a company. If you've ever been involved with the stock market, sometimes you can tell the undervalued companies by how little they're valued. Some companies on the FTSE 250 in London, for example, can enter the market at £50 million and in 5 years' time be worth hundreds of millions of pounds, if not billions of pounds. So yeah, to answer the question, Bitcoin was the start of all of this ecosystem. It was the beta testing period to have people familiarized with it. It helps them educate people to a degree that this is where the future is going to lie. And Ethereum, which I think we mentioned on the last show, has similar sort of type of origins, but Ethereum itself is slightly different. It serves a different purpose. You can put smart contracts onto Ethereum, and you can't on Bitcoin. So Bitcoin basically is outdated technology. Some of the ones we'll talk about in a short period of time here, they have all these added features that some of these older, more prehistoric now, as silly as it sounds, coins actually have. They can't do things that these newer companies can do. So again, if you're looking to identify what would be valuable in the future, you want to have stuff that's got more unique selling points. Does that make sense?
Yeah. When you mention mining and Bitcoin in particular, it's something that I can't imagine what mining is, because obviously I know what mining is for things
Yeah.
like, you know, gold, diamonds, coal. But
Yeah.
mining, how does that work? Because you've got something digital, and not something I've heard of any relation before in like the IT world, digital world, in relation to like what mining would pertain to with this sort of like.
Yeah, this mining itself is a way of acquiring bitcoins directly from the source, and it's basically a computer program that solves equations, and it's basically a setup of you acquiring very small amounts of a block. So there's lots of different blocks on the blockchain. It keeps building, but there's only a certain amount of blocks available. So the more problems that are solved, the more your computers can facilitate of solving these equations. That's what's referred to as mining. So that's why if you've ever seen any of those big warehouses that are scattered all over the world, they're just lined up with hundreds and thousands of computers and all just flickering off at the same time. All these lights are going off, but they're basically mining these early coins like Bitcoin, I think Ethereum as well. But they still can do more mining. So they're going to be forever using lots of energy to continue mining. It's not the traditional mining that our great grandfathers would have been involved with. More modern history of mining is gold miners and stuff, but it's a more modern term that's used to just acquire directly from the source the actual bitcoins themselves, as opposed to buying them from somebody that's mined them. There's a lot of miners out there. A large percentage of them are in China and Russia. I think the majority of them are over that particular part of the world, which is a bit of a problem from a sort of a political point of view for any particular company. If a lot of the control is in one particular place, it kind of discourages other people from wanting to be involved with it, or making it more unilateral, making it more generalized. So it's very controlled. But mining itself just is a cheeky term that refers to the way that they acquire them directly from solving problems on the computers. You with me? Or the loser?
Yeah, it's made it a bit more clear. Obviously, it still is a bit mind-blowing, because it's like saying, how does a computer work? Unless you're a programmer or you understand, how the construction of the internals are. And I'm wondering, like, obviously, I don't know anything about it from where I've come in from. Does someone need to understand those particular details to get into cryptocurrency, to start putting money into it?
Yeah, I completely understand. It's, like I said, it's a new world. We come from a different generation. A lot of this terminology is kind of like incomprehensible to a degree. But as I said, it's just a cheeky term that's used to refer to the way they're acquiring the origin coins themselves. There was only on Bitcoin, there was only over 21 million coins that were ever available, and they're down to the last couple of million now. But over the course of the last 15 years, they gradually mined it completely out. So unfortunately, in the future, they'll have to do one of two things with the blockchain. They'll either have to find a way of forking the chain so they can facilitate more coins, so they can continue the mining, or there will be some exponential growth in the price. But the miners will probably at that point be out of business. So as I said, it kind of tells you that there's an end point with a few of these blockchains. But some of the more modern blockchains, they don't have this issue. The one I mentioned a minute ago, Ripple XRP, they pre-mined a lot of their coins. So for example, with XRP, there's no mining. It uses a consensus model. It's for energy efficiency. So as I mentioned previously, some of the criteria I would look for, energy efficiency is probably the most important one right now. You want something that's not going to be very energy heavy. But this particular company pre-mined 100 billion coins, and that's the maximum amount of coins that will ever be in circulation. So if it is a case where there is value being moved on their blockchain, there will be generally an increase in the price to facilitate the movement of the coins. Because a way to think about it is, if one particular blockchain wants to move $100 million, and there's only 100 billion coins, you would need a certain amount of coins to move that value. But if the price was significantly higher, then it would be a lot easier to facilitate that kind of money movement. So that particular company is one that I like a lot, and I've done quite well out of it over the years. It's one that I generally believe is probably the key one to what would be a necessity in a new system, because it's basically focusing on cross-border payments between banks. So it's not generally a private retail like investors kind of market. That's more aimed at the big money movements. So to move big money, you'd probably need a substantial increase in the value of the coin to even start moving some of that money. So that's why I believe, on my list, number one, I would say would be something of significant interest would be that particular one. Its goal, as I said, is to act as a bridge currency. So what it wants to do, and what it has been doing for a long time, is it converts a currency. So if you was to send pounds to euros, it would give you like an automatic exchange rate that's a lot better than what you would generally get through a currency exchange rate. And it would move the currency straight away within seconds based on that immediate conversion. So it serves a big purpose for businesses in particular, institutions, people that want to, move money very, very quickly, which generally is like institutional money. It's kind of what they would want if you was one of them. But the infrastructure itself is moving money very fast and safely. So that's the one. If I was to make a list, that would be probably the top one on my list. Did that make all sense? Why that one might be of value?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the one question I've got, well, I don't know if it's a question or whether it's a bit of a sort of like curiosity, is I think for any of us who've been on social media, got social media accounts, we've probably all been bombarded, pitch slapped with people saying, "Oh, hi there. Are you interested in Bitcoin, or are you interested in investing and earning money? Getting sort of like get rich scheme sort of approach through cryptocurrency. I can make you this or whatever. How much have you got to invest?" So I'm sure a lot of people like me are thinking when they see those things, is it all like this? Is it all people that are just trying to, I don't want to say scam, but
yeah,
not really genuine? And I think it puts people off that don't know, or they don't know someone such as you who understands it and who can give people a little bit of, background information with obviously without telling them what to do, without giving financial advice. But do you think that's a bit of a sticking point on why people don't get into it?
Yeah, of course. I completely understand. When I first got into it, that was one of the things that I saw a lot, people promoting something, and you get the promise that this is going to do this and do this, and it never does it. What you have to remember is the majority of these coins in this particular asset class, probably like a higher percentage, 90, are probably likely scams. I think Elon Musk actually said it in court this week he's doing a court case with OpenAI. He said a large percentage, if not 90% of these are scams. And the reason it's a scammer's dream is because you and I could set up a coin today on any particular blockchain, and with the right marketing play, you could promote it to a point where people bought it. And what you would then do, likelihood, what a lot of people have done over the years, Donald Trump in particular, Jake Paul and the Paul brothers have done it. Lots of high profile people have done this. KSI, people just off the top of my head, but there's lots of examples of people that basically created a coin, employed someone familiar with the technology, and when the time has got to a right where they've sort of promoted it, they drop the whole bag of what they hold. A good example is something like Jake Paul had one called Zoo, and he promoted that it was going to be CoffeeZilla did a video on it. If you're familiar with the investigator CoffeeZilla on YouTube, but basically what he done is he created a coin. He had a bunch of developers creating a coin, and then never fulfilled any of the promises that were made about it. It was going to be some sort of type of game where you create, eggs or something or other, and they hatch, and they're going to be collectible or something like this. But the point is like it's quite easy if you've got the right people to be able to create something, give a lot of false promises out there, and it not come to fruition. And the people that control the majority of the coins, they dump it at the same time, and obviously inevitably the price significantly decreases and crashes. So you've got to be very, very careful. You know, a good way to sort of identify bad companies like this is all this information about any cryptocurrency is public knowledge, and you can find it all on websites like coinmarketcap.com, and there's many different ways you can sort of access it. But generally, one thing you could do is see what kind of percentage is held by, you know, very small amounts of wallets. So the more diversified a coin is, the more wallets that hold it, the less people with big holdings, you know, the very more difficult it is for them to try and act a scam out. But a lot of the ones you're talking about, you know, you might find that there'll be they're referred to as meme coins, and there's just ridiculous ideas. You know, people chase them. They're aware they're scams, but they also know that at some point during the scam, the price is going to go up before it crashes. You want to try and avoid them at all costs. You know, I try to think myself as a bit more of a serious, savvy investor, and this is why I try to identify what would be a utility. So you want to find something that has like a utility focus, as opposed to something that's just going to be like a pump and dump, or something that's just going to make somebody some quick money and run away into the sunset. There was a young kid who was like 13 years old about 2 years ago. He set up a coin on Solana, had a website, had a YouTube channel, was promoting it, and live on the stream, he actually sold 95% of the bag. And I think it was like $30,000 or $40,000 or pounds or whatever it was that was in the value of the coin. He basically took it out, and people were angry. They made the mistake. But you have to do diligence. But during this whole ecosystem, you know, there are inevitable winners. But whether or not they're diluting it on purpose so that people kind of lose track or are discouraged, like you mentioned, or feel like it's something that isn't going to be beneficial for them to understand, I think it's kind of a play by the high society to discourage people from trying to do the research and diligence into what would be valuable here.
Okay, so my last question, because I know we're going to do a part 2 to this, aren't we? We agreed that this would be something of a little bit of an intro, and it'd be with a view to a part 2 where people could put some questions to us before, or maybe send some questions in the comments after the show, so we can look at those questions, see what you've got on your mind, what you want to bring up, and what we can explore and dig into a little bit further. So my last question to wrap it up, because I know we said we could do half an hour tonight. We've gone over a little bit. I think it's really good subjects to explore. I think it's so fascinating that some of the things that people don't know about, that I don't know about, that I don't know who to trust. Until I met you, I didn't know what I would do with it. It wouldn't be something I'd just jump into without getting any background info. So if someone, let's say like me, before we became friends, was sort of curious about it, but they had no idea what to do, what would be your opinion?
I don't think it's one of those ones where you want to employ somebody for financial advice. There's not really services that are available right now because it's such a new asset class. Generally, if you was looking for advice in one of the traditional asset classes like stocks or bonds or commodities, you know, you'd employ somebody who's spent their life in it and knows what they're talking about. But it's such a new field that the first thing I would do is try to understand where the value might be and actually try and take the time to do it yourself. You know, a lot of people spend a lot of time on social media these days. There's lots of misinformation, so you have to kind of gauge what potentially could be and what couldn't not be like correct. But I would say the first thing you want to do is familiarize yourself with what might be beneficial and familiarize yourself with what a utility would be, a purpose for something, rather than just trying to get somebody to tell you. Because in the future there will be companies, and I'm sure there are companies now. I think there's a few based out in the Middle East and Dubai. I know people that work for some in Dubai. You know, they do advise and they do make money, but you're also going to have to lose a lot of your profits if you are successful. And a lot of these guys have got the same information that you would have access to. That's the beauty of the internet, is having access to it. So I would do diligence. I would use the tools that are provided to us. I would try and use, there's good websites, like I said, like Coin Market Cap, where you can follow these coins, put them into a watch list, familiarize yourself by clicking on each of the coins, and you can see a bit more about the distribution of the coins, like I mentioned a minute ago, who owns how much, what the biggest wallets have. You can familiarize yourself with what the use cases would be. And then I would make a decision on, it's a high risk market. So it's going to be classed when it matures. It still will be regarded as a high risk market, but do some sort of type of, personal risk assessment. So what can I afford to lose? I think one of the things I would say to anybody that's looking to get involved with this is go in with the mindset that, it is high risk. Don't overexpose yourself. It's always good advice, but there also is high rewards on the back end of it. This is one of the things about this particular asset class being so immature and so young at this stage, is when it does mature, the gains are going to be something unprecedented. We've seen it a few times over the last few years. When they have cycles, it's quite a cyclical market at the moment, where it will run through periods of time where it's up, periods of times where it's down. If you can just familiarize yourself with it and have a bit of pattern recognition, I think, you won't need to employ somebody. But personally, like I said, I would have, wallets and just have X and, the tools that we're provided with, and just familiarize myself with it, and keep an eye on the ones that you feel maybe have value. And at some point over time, you do realize what a good price is to enter. There's never a guarantee of the right price to buy or the right price to sell, depending on what your goals would be. If you want to make 100% on your money, or, I've made significantly more than that over the years. But it depends how risky you want to be. So to answer your question, I wouldn't employ any advisors. I wouldn't go out looking for people to give me information. I wouldn't pay for any services. I wouldn't pay for any programs. I would just literally put the time in to try and understand it, as you would anything else.
Thank you for that. That was great. I really enjoyed that.
Time goes so quick. Time goes so quick.
When are you thinking of doing the part 2, the follow-up to this?
Whenever you want. I think it'd be a good idea to sort of explore a few of what potentially might be part of that infrastructure. I think we should do part 2 on, the candidates, maybe. Maybe go away and do a little bit more research into some of the suggestions I provide you personally, and we can maybe cover a few of those in the next one. You can maybe point out some of the reasons why certain companies might be good shouts and good value, and what their unique selling points might be going forward to a conspiracy minded person who understands that we're living in some type of dystopian future not too far away from us now, where they are going to want to control everything. The 15-minute cities aren't far away. They're being tested right now. The digital enslavement is upon us. So I think before that happens, we should maybe do a couple of relatively short shows where we can share some good information.
Brilliant. So, okay.
If you want to do something maybe later on the week or next week, whenever you're free, see if we get any good responses from people that are in the chats here. I know we've got a bunch of people that pop in and watch these on the playback, and obviously some people in the chats. And thank you for everybody that popped in to sort of see the show. But I'm sure this is valuable information. And it'd be quite interesting to see maybe down the line in a year, maybe 2 years, 3 years, maybe some of the candidates that we do identify actually turn out to be part of this plumbing, as I like to call it.
Yeah, let's see who comes up with some good questions in the comments, and then we can put that together and add to it a little bit, other than the things that I'm obviously putting to you. So it can give some people some answers to their curiosity.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe we look in a week's time, allow for some questions to come in, and we can get on a second follow-up show.
Love it. I love it. I would like to have Sean in from the Rabbit Hole, because I know that he's obviously very financial minded as well. It'd be nice to have Sean pop in, because I know he's probably got a lot of opinions. I know he mentioned before he's been involved with Bitcoin quite relatively early. So it'd be nice to have a few other opinions of people. But if there are people that do watch the playback and are in the chat, that got some questions, and there's things here that, I can shed some light on, and we can talk about and discuss in a bit more detail. I think going forward, I would like to talk about this stuff, because it's something I've made quite a success out of. I love the conspiracy stuff. I love all that world, but this is something that's close to my heart and financially been beneficial to me. So I'd like to share these experiences in a for grander way, and hopefully help some people out on the journey, because this will be part of the future, I think. And I think the earlier people familiarize themselves with it, I think maybe the more success that they can bring to their own personal life. So rather than touching people with just conspiracy updates, maybe we can, help people find these maybe gems that are going to be stuck in this blockchain ecosystem world that we're going to be force-fed. We're being force-fed now anyway. They're just changing the laws and the regulations so that everything ticks off all the boxes. But if you want to do a show, should we say some point, maybe every weekend or next week, just let me know your availability. And I really look forward to chatting on the next one. Hopefully we can get some people in from the comment section to throw some suggestions to us and maybe show us some of their successes or losses and experiences. And I think it brings a lot of awareness to people like yourself who are looking to get into it. I've suggested it to my dad and people a little bit more older than me. It seems to fly over a lot of people's heads. So I think just talking about it in a nice, calm way, in a very simple way, I think it might serve a lot of purpose. So hopefully that's what the goal of this is. And let's do another one. So if you're all right there, John, that's 40 minutes. I think I've overrun you by 10 minutes, so I do apologise.
No worries. It's good fun. Thank you for this.
Always good fun.
And thanks to everyone in the chat and everyone who's viewed and who's going to view the show after it's gone out live. And we'll see you on the next one pretty soon.
It's been a pleasure, my friends. Have a good evening. Bye, mate. Bye.